And just know the FDA does regulate supplements, and you can say pretty much anything as long as you don't say anything it cures, prevents, or treats diseases. So know that there can be false testimonials out there.
One of the most important things that I teach people when they put things in their cart is look at the food
Yeah.
ingredients. If one of the top 5 ingredients is sugar, put it back on the shelf. Sugar is the number one killer. It is toxic, and too much sugar all the time leads to metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, and then, of course, type 2 diabetes, and the beat goes on.
There was one thing that the people could really own. That would be the understanding of the power, the role, the duty, the responsibility, the authority of our states.
We are really passionate about helping people be long-term well or have this thing called longevity. Now, we know that the body is run off of nutrients, not drugs. We're not anti-drugs, but if we don't have the right nutrients, our body can't really run the engine right. Let's talk about the core 4 that we think are the most important. And let's start with vitamin D.
Well, just to overlay this discussion of supplements, the supplement industry is billions of dollars out there.
It is
And we're talking tens of billions of dollars and getting bigger every
bigger.
day. So this market out there is huge. And just know the FDA does regulate supplements, and you can say pretty much anything as long as you don't say anything it cures, prevents, or treats diseases. So know that there can be false testimonials out there, right? That
That
don't say they cure diseases, but they say, like a celebrity will say, I take this. First and foremost, the one that we always recommend is vitamin D, as in David. We like vitamin D to be paired with vitamin K, because vitamin K helps sort of escort calcium, which D helps absorb in the gut, into the bones and out of the arteries. So D and K kind of go together, like we do, kind of like, the queen
M&M.
and the king, right? The bottom line is, though, everyone needs a good, solid form of vitamin D. We recommend for everyone over at least 12 years of age to have 5,000 international units. And that is what we put into our own DK combination. It's also got about 500 micrograms of vitamin K1 and just under 100 of vitamin K2. Really, really important to get those right ratios there. And I like to take the guesswork out of it. Now, key point about vitamin D, the darker one's skin is, the more vitamin D one needs. You cannot, I'll make this emphatic statement that I really believe, you cannot get enough vitamin D by just being in the sun today. I believe because of the toxicity in our environment and the toxicity within this environment, our skin and our body, because the skin is both a barrier that lets things in and keeps things out as well. So I just think we need this. This is why D is so important. From a blood lab, somewhere between about 50 and 90 is what we're looking for.
Well, and also we do a genetic test. You can find that genetic test on our website.
Yeah.
When we look at genetics, a lot of times individuals have what's called a vitamin D receptor defect, which means they need a little bit higher level of vitamin D going past the receptors to get into the inside of the cells. And number 2, some individuals don't actually process vitamin D from the skin into its active form. So therefore, needing a little bit higher level of vitamin D. The last key points about vitamin D is it is an antidepressant. When the sun goes behind the clouds in the winter time, people get seasonal affective disorder. They get a little bit blue. It's also very, very good, you said, for the bones, and it's very good for the immune system. It brings up the cells that need to function a little better, kind of calms down the ones that are overactive. So vitamin D does the body good. Let's just talk a little bit about omega-3s. That's number 2 on the list.
It is. We've tested a marker with blood labs called the omega index for 15 years. 100% of the people we've tested without supplementing appropriately have been deficient. I didn't say
That is true.
99, 100%.
100%.
This is fascinating to me because the omega-3 fatty acids, we're talking specifically, we don't need to get into the complexity of it, EPA and DHA specifically, these necessary essential omega-3s. Those things need to be a certain level to help us with brain, our heart, our cell health, and overall inflammation. When people are low in D and low in omega, they're going to have brain fog and they're going to have joint pain. People need about 3 grams of that. And many times they go out here and buy just this fish oil, which has minuscule amounts of DHA and EPA respectively, and that does you no good. It actually creates the cascade of creating more inflammation. So omega-3s, everybody needs those. Everybody listening to us right now needs to have the right kind of omega-3s.
And to top that off, again, in the genetics, where you can find that link on our website
Yep.
if you want to have your genes tested, individuals that carry the ApoE4, they cannot offload omega-3s to the brain efficiently and effectively. So therefore, again, they need a little bit higher levels, specifically of that DHA, passing by those receptors. Because who wants brain disease if we can avoid it? Also, in the inflammatory section, if a person's inflammation levels are upregulated, omega-3s are anti-inflammatory. They take the inflammation in the system down. It's like changing oil in the engine of your car. We
That's right.
need to have the right omega-3 to 6 ratio. Most Americans have a 20-to-1 omega-6 to 3 ratio, and it should be really 3-to-1, and optimally it should be 1-to-1.
Yeah, no question. And we talked about D and omegas. Now we got to talk about a multi. Everybody needs a good multivitamin mineral, not just a multi that has multiple things in it, but you got to get certain therapeutic amounts and you got to get the right form. There's a lot of multis on the market, but most of them are absolutely the cheapest form in minuscule amounts that do nothing for you. So don't go down to the drugstore and buy, just like these ideas of these, I can't say the name. I don't want to say the names, but the bottom line is some of these ones out there to the public that are made for men's over 50 and women's over 50 are just garbage. So that's why we're very selective with our one that we like. We like BioMulti Plus, quite honestly, is one that I like a lot.
Yes, and it fills in the tank. If somebody's on
Yeah.
medication, there might be a nutrient pullout. A multivitamin can replace the losses. Last but not least, magnesium. We wouldn't complete the list if we didn't talk a little bit about magnesium.
Yeah, the balance of our core force magnesium. I mean, it's known as the great relaxer. How many people out there have hypertension or high blood pressure? People are
A
deficient
lot.
in magnesium. How many people out there have constipation issues?
A
How many people
lot.
have restless leg,
A lot.
syndrome, or muscle tightness or stress?
A lot.
Magnesium is a great stress
Stress.
reliever, and it helps with sleep. And most people are deficient in magnesium, so we've given a proper form of magnesium. There's very cheap magnesium out there. There's magnesium oxide that's just terrible. Don't buy that. I like magnesium glycinate, magnesium threonate, magnesium malate. The one I like the best for all utilities, magnesium glycinate, which is what we put as part of our core 4.
So our core 4, vitamin D, omega-3s, magnesium, and to top it off, a multivitamin.
There you
Does
go.
a body good.
Core 4.
Stay tuned as we talk about what's on your food labels.
We'll teach you how to interpret those confusing languages.
And when you navigate through these economies with people, here's what happens. We want to hold their hand through it, let them know when it's time to buy, sell, reallocate, get out of Dodge. Because a lot of times when you're struck with fear does 2 things. Number 1, it can paralyze, and people just put their head in the sand and say, I'm just going to forget about it and hopefully it gets better. Or it causes you to make a wrong decision. And this is why we are here, is to help people navigate through the political quagmire nonsense that's going on, the economic malaise, and the absolute collapse that we're seeing. And when our freedoms are eroding, our political freedoms, our economic freedoms, our personal freedoms, our religious freedoms, our health freedoms, they're all tied together. But you know what doesn't need to erode with that? Our finances.
KirkElliottPhD.com/Sherwood.
There's a lot of talk these days about human enhancement.
Terms like biohacking, bioharmonizing, biosynergizing, stacking, resilience, and anti-fragility.
In our clinic, the Functional Medical Institute, we've been helping people of all shapes, sizes, and backgrounds improve their quality of their physiology and maximize their lives.
So, you can follow the latest fads and gimmicks and maybe find some things that work for you.
Or you can add Kingdom Fuel to your daily regimen right now.
It's the simple start to a transformed life.
Our unique meal shakes are balanced, low glycemic, rich in fiber with 20 grams of clean protein, essential vitamins and minerals, healthy fats, and organic fruits and vegetables. Kingdom Fuel is vegan with a complete amino acid profile.
No gimmicks, just proven results.
Start today at sherwood.tv/fuel.
Hey there, Kevin Sorbo here. Now, deep down, we know this. We're more than just a brain and a body. We're a spirit, we're a soul, and we're also a physical temple. If you hit the wall when you're trying to improve one aspect of your being, it's probably because, well, other aspects are sabotaging our success. So that's why diets don't work. And frankly, why so much conventional wisdom from our so-called medical establishments falls flat. Doctors Michele and Mark Sherwood have a very different approach. I should know because I happen to be one of their patients. They address the whole person to get to know you, your challenges, and more importantly, what your goals are. Then they offer a complete plan that addresses your unique biology and your heart. They'll help you discover what you need to experience transformation. So find out more at sherwood.tv/Sorbo. That's sherwood.tv/Sorbo, or see the link before. Now I'm heading for a workout. You should be going for a workout too. All right, guys. God bless.
We like to educate people. We have a huge passion for educating people, especially on what they're eating. When someone goes to the grocery store, we definitely have to educate them on what is on a label. Let's start to talk a little bit about what's important when people pick up something and go to put it in their cart.
Well, first of all, the labels are sort of regulated by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, and they have certain things that are going to be on there. Obviously, it's going to have your ingredients, right? And people need to know that the first ingredient listed in order is probably the most widely used ingredient within that recipe, whatever it is. It's going to have the serving size. Serving size can be like in ounces, something of that nature. It's going to have the number of servings within the container. Now, this is where people get hung up a lot because a serving, like in a can of soda, the serving might be 2. Right? But then it's going to have calories. So calories are going to be listed per serving. So if you have 2 servings, whatever calories is there, it's actually going to be double that if you consume the whole can. And obviously it's going to have proteins, carbs, and fats and grams, right? Which is important. And it'll have some minerals and nutrients sometimes listed out there in percentage of recommended daily allowance, which we can debate that all day long. I think that is probably not totality what you need. And then it's based upon a 2,000 calorie diet. And we did a lot of shows and talks on calories and how the fallacy of that is. But again, nutrient labels are there for a reason, but they're really, really confusing.
One of the most important things that I teach people when they put things in their cart is look at the food ingredients.
Yeah.
If one of the top 5 ingredients is sugar, put it back on the shelf. Sugar is the number 1 killer. It is toxic, and too much sugar all the time leads to metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, and then of course type 2 diabetes, and the beat goes on. The next thing is we have to become aware of, like as you said,
Yep.
serving size. Who can stop at just 1 chip? Who can stop at just 1 cookie? And it's not a criticism. We really haven't ever been educated that we have to be aware of what we're consuming. So as you stated, there is a number of servings in the container, and then there is a number that equals the serving size. And if that serving size is 3 chips, We got to stop, put the clip on the chips, and then put it back in the cupboard, or we are overeating. Also, in terms of carbohydrates, the breakdowns of carbohydrates, there are different things there. There's fiber, there's net carbs, there's, total carbs. Talk a little bit about just, what someone is looking at when they're looking at the carbohydrate load.
So proteins, carbohydrates, and fats are known as macronutrients. And from macronutrients, we get our micronutrients. The micronutrients are going to be vitamins, minerals, amino acids, fatty acids that the body uses. But when you see the carbohydrate section on a nutrient label, there's going to be things underneath that. So carbohydrates will be listed there, and you'll see kind of in dashes below that, you'll see grams of sugar, right? And what that's talking about is the number of grams of sugar occurring within that product, right? Within the product as a whole. And then it will have added sugars. A lot of things will have added sugars. For example, like you look at milk. Milk has sugar in it, but if you add sugar to it, you're going to have the sugar and the added sugar. And then you have your fiber that's listed there typically, because sometimes these fibers will subtract from the total carbohydrates, giving you what's called as net carbs. So what you get is the sugars minus the grams of fiber equals net carbohydrates. Now, there's a lot of discussion on what that really means as far as to human body. But the bottom line is the more sugars we have, as you stated, the more real drugs we get in our system, and people are addicted to the sugar component.
So we know we need to look at the ingredient label for sugars, and we need to look at the carbohydrates and evaluate for fiber. Fiber delays the absorption of sugars.
Yep.
We also need to look at that label for things like trans fats, hydrogenated oils, and other things that can simply junk up the system. Do you have any comment on the fats?
Well, fat is not bad. We were taught a long time ago that fat was a bad thing. Fat creates cholesterol, and fat's a bad thing. Therefore, fat is something that should be avoided. But now we understand that the cell membranes we have are consistent and constructed with these things called phospholipids, which are fats. We've talked about in previous shows about how fats are necessary for brain health, right? Fat does a lot of good for our body. So fat does indeed do a body good. But we have trans fats or trans hydrogenated fats. We're talking about fats that have been molecularly changed in chemical structure. These fats that should be liquid are now made solid. They're in the wrong form. And our body sees that as a foreign form, a foreign invader, thereby triggering inflammation. And because of the volume of these trans fats, which are cheap, fake, faux fats, let's call them, our bodies now look at that as negative, and it creates the inflammatory cascade we talked about. Those fats should be avoided at all costs because they will cause damage to that phospholipid layer of the cells. So if you want to have cellular damage, which creates a rapid aging process, go for it. Have a whole serving of trans fats.
So we've talked about, looking at the label, making sure that sugar is not one of the first 5 ingredients. We've talked about the oils that can be toxic to the system. The other thing I always like to point out is if there is something on the label that is in the ingredient list that you cannot pronounce or cannot understand, it's usually an additive or preservative, some sort of a metabolic waste product. It's a dye or something that the body, if you can't pronounce it, and you don't understand it, can you imagine what the cells of your body are actually thinking? They can't understand it either. So as we become consumers and we are interested in what we're consuming, reading a label can be very, very powerful for long-term health.
There you go. So we gave you an interpretation on how to become an expert at the language of label reading. Don't get trapped up in it and don't get fooled. Read the labels, go back and listen to this segment over and over again until you get it. And happy label reading to you. What does our Constitution really mean? And how do we interpret it? Find out next with our constitutional attorney expert, Chris Ann Hall.
Let's get real. Most emergency food is just as bad for you as any other choice in the standard American diet. And that's just sad.
We don't just need food. We need highly nutritional food.
We don't just want to survive food shortages, we are meant to thrive in adversity.
Complete your daily nutrition and have shelf-stable Kingdom Fuel as a cornerstone of your food supply.
Don't sacrifice your health or your taste buds.
Stock up on Kingdom Fuel now.
And when you navigate through these economies with people, here's what happens. we want to hold their hand through it, let them know when it's time to buy, sell, reallocate, get out of Dodge. Because a lot of times when you're struck with fear, fear does two things. Number one, it can paralyze, and people just put their head in the sand and say, I'm just going to forget about it and hopefully it gets better. Or it causes you to make a wrong decision. And this is why we are here, is to help people navigate through the political quagmire nonsense that's going on, the economic malaise, and the absolute collapse that we're seeing. And when our freedoms are eroding, our political freedoms, our economic freedoms, our personal freedoms, our religious freedoms, our health freedoms, they're all tied together. But you know what doesn't need to erode with that? Our finances.
KirkElliottPhD.com/Sherwood.
You know, people often ask me, what has been the most destructive lie the American people have been taught about the federal government and the U.S. Constitution? Now, Doc, you and I have talked about this on a previous segment, but it really boils down to the lie that the Supremacy Clause in the Constitution establishes that the federal government and federal laws are superior to state laws and state constitution. Now, our previous segment went into detail and explained how that is absolutely not true. And just a simple reading of Article 6, Clause 2, which is the Supremacy Clause, proves that. But you see, with that deception that has really infested the minds and politics of American government, we have had a falling away of the understanding of governors and attorneys general and even the people of their states of the power and the duty and the responsibility of the state to stand against the exercise of unauthorized federal power. And if there was one thing that I want the American people to really know today, if there was one thing that the American people could know that would change the whole dynamic. I'm not usually a one thing person, right? Because I understand that life is multifaceted and there are many solutions to a single problem and there are complications and details that need to be worked out. So I'm never really a one thing person, but in this situation, there was one thing that the people could really own. That would be the understanding of the power, the role, the duty, the responsibility, the authority of our states to say to the federal government, I'm sorry, that the Constitution does not authorize the exercise of that power, and we will not comply. And so in that authority, we have a solution to nearly every single federal problem that we see today. The ATF gun grab. States actually have the authority and the duty to say, no, we're not going to let you enforce those laws in our state because there's no authority for you to govern what we sell and how our people keep and bear arms within our states. There's no authority for you for that. No, we're not going to let your Environmental Protection Agency come in and rule and reign over our land. And by the way, the FDA and the USDA, sorry, we don't find that authority in the Constitution. Because remember, we're the states that created the federal government. We're the creators of the federal government. And as the creators of the federal government, we have the authority to say, you know what, we didn't create you with that power. So that power does not exist to be authorized in our state. Not only are we not going to help you exercise that power, but we're not going to let you exercise that power on our people. the Department of Education, the Department of Interior, the Department of Ag, the Forestry Service. All of these organizations are extra constitutional. And according to Article 6, Clause 2, if their power is not exercised pursuant to the Constitution, the power is null and void. And what the American people and our governors and our attorneys general need to understand is that applies to the judiciary as well. The Supreme Court's authority is limited and defined by Article 3. The Supreme Court and federal court authority is limited and defined by the powers delegated to the federal government. So if the power, the authority is not delegated to the federal government, the federal judiciary doesn't have jurisdiction over the matter. So if there is no authority for delegated to the federal government to rule and reign over what we eat, what we drink, what we smoke, what we ingest, what we wear, what we buy, what we sell, how we live, how do we use our resources in our states, all these things that happen internally in the state, then the Supreme Court has no jurisdiction over those matters either. So we have to understand, and we really have to own this, that our states not only have an authority, they have a responsibility to say no. And we have this information documented for you in our book, Sovereign Duty. We have this information documented for you in a film we call Non-Compliant Movie that can be found at noncompliantmovie.com. And we want to help you know this because all political powers derive from the people, and the people have to stand for the proper application of their Constitution in order to defend their rights. So thank you, Doc, for letting me bring this information to the people. There are many ways to come to this understanding. We want to help you with some of them, but that's the one thing I wish everybody would know right now.
There's a lot of talk these days about human enhancement.
Terms like biohacking, bioharmonizing, biosynergizing, stacking, resilience, and anti-fragility.
In our clinic, the Functional Medical Institute, we've been helping people of all shapes, sizes, and backgrounds improve their quality of their physiology and maximize their lives.
So, you can follow the latest fads and gimmicks and maybe find some things that work for you.
Or you can add Kingdom Fuel to your daily regimen right now.
It's the simple start to a transformed life.
Our unique meal shakes are balanced, low glycemic, rich in fiber with 20 grams of clean protein, essential vitamins and minerals, healthy fats, and organic fruits and vegetables. Kingdom Fuel is vegan with a complete amino acid profile.
No gimmicks, just proven results.
Start today at sherwood.tv/fuel.